So, welcome back. We're here to talk about getting organised now. Getting organised in time management is vital, and one of the things that stops us is ourselves. In particular, I want to talk about time robbers. The first flavour is the ones self-inflicted by us. Let's look at self-inflicted time robbers. First aspect of this is procrastination. Now, be honest, how many of you put things off? Now, there's no show of hands, and I simply don't believe it. Come on, I'll admit it, I do it as well. Good, now we're all being honest. Putting things off. Why? Why do we put things off? What sort of things do we put off? Do we put off having that bit of fun? Do we put off going to play that extra round of golf? Do we put off doing something we want to do? No. Yeah, okay, so we put off the things we don't want to do. Exactly. Procrastination. We have to deal with it. It's a very, very bad time robber. Because let's be honest, that thing still needs to be done in the future. So by not doing it straight away, you're occupying some of your mind's attention on that future unpleasant event, which means that you're less in the present, you're less in the here and now, and you're more worried about what you've got to do than dealing with what you're doing now. If you've got something difficult to deal with it straight away, because your mind will be clearer as a result, and you'll be more effective as a human being by doing the things you need to do now, as opposed to having lots of things you're worrying about. Now, a lot of this is dealt with in my book Cellular Attitude, which some of you have already bought, which I'm pleased to see. But actually, when you think about it, our life is all about being here, being now, and living our life to the fullest with as much enjoyment as possible. So, getting rid of the bad stuff quickly makes us feel better. In fact, how many of you will agree with me when I say, when we've done the nasty thing we have to do, we always feel a lot better? Exactly. So, if doing the nasty thing ultimately gives us a feeling of happiness, we should do more of it. Just a thought. The other thing, of course, is indecision. Now, in the British Army, they will teach you... No, I haven't been in the Army. I've got the body for it, I know. So, in the British Army, they will say to you this: good or bad, but make a decision. Whether you're right or wrong, make a decision. Indecision is the worst thing that can happen in a military situation, because whatever you do, if you make no decision, it's likely to be the wrong one. So make a decision. Don't just sit there going, what shall I do? If in doubt, ask Google. That's what I always say. Or ask your manager, or ask a colleague, but do something. Or, and one other aspect of this, is decide not to make a decision and say, right, I will make a decision on this tomorrow. That's a decision, to put that decision off to later. That's not indecision. Indecision is going, I don't know what to do, so I'm not even going to think about it. Now, huge in time management is delegation. Failure to delegate. Now, delegation is an art form in itself, because whilst you might think if you're a manager, it's easy to delegate to your staff, what if you want to delegate up the chain of command? What if you want to delegate something to your manager? Sorry, what was that? Okay, I haven't met your manager, fair enough. But let's be honest, if you're not going to be able to do the thing that he needs you to do, isn't it better for him to know and say, look, I need some help. Can you help me do this? Can you show me how to do this? Can you find me some more resources to help me do my job properly? Ultimately, that's better for him to hear than you going, I'm not sure, and having that extra stress on your head. The other thing about self-inflicted is failure to stop people delegating to you. We'll come to that later. Now, the third one, you're not going to be very happy with me for coming up with, but it's socialising at work. Now, I don't want to be a dragon here and say you're here to work, not have fun, because I think you can do both in a good workplace. But sometimes people forget the reason they're here and have too much fun, or spend too much time chatting, gossiping, talking about things that are not necessary. And this has got a terrible effect for the business. And whether you care about the business or not, if you are socialising, then you at work are not doing what you've got to do. That's one person who's being ineffective. But let's be honest, there's two people involved, because whoever you're socialising with is also not being effective. So your socialising is costing two people's work to not be done. And that isn't fair. socialise at lunch. And I don't mean to sound horrible like that, but actually think about what you're here for. Focus and be focused on what you're doing. Because let's be honest, how many of you have had to work late? Right, so you've had to work late not being with your family. Are you saying you'd rather have had that chat with Bill and Claire at the coffee machine than have the time with your daughter? No, so why would you spend the time talking? Every minute you spend talking to Bill and Claire, for example, is a minute less with little Jimmy. I know that sounds harsh, okay, but it's the truth. So, fatigue. Of course, because you're socialising at work, not delegating and procrastinating, making decisions, having to work extremely long hours. Because of that, you're extremely tired. Because you're tired, you're not doing your job properly. So when you are in work, you're working at half speed, which is making the problem even worse. Sleep. And if you are going home and then watching television till 1 o'clock in the morning, my advice is go to bed a bit earlier, because your overall life will be happier. The late nighters are for Friday and Saturday if you're working on a Monday to Friday. I'm sorry if this makes it sound like I'm being harsh and boring, but I don't think it's boring to have an enjoyable workplace, be full of energy and be full of life. I think it is boring to work 14-hour days because you can't catch up with what you're doing. Okay, lack of organisation. Not being organised is one of the easiest things to remedy in anyone's work time. We just looked at how we could reorganise Gordon's workday so that he had more time, just by simple planning. How many of you come to work in the morning with a ready-made do list in prioritisation? Okay, a couple of them. So we looked at having the problem about you failing to delegate to others. Now, overcommitting is where you have taken on too much work from people that are delegating down to you. You've got to be able to say no to being delegated to, as well as being able to delegate to others. Very, very important. And lastly, unnecessary meetings that you call. Often, I think people call meetings not because they want to do work, but as an excuse for socialising. Okay, come on, hands up. How many of you in here show meetings? That's 6 of you. How many of you have called a meeting specifically because you want to have a bit of a chat and a gossip? Now it's funny, none of you put your hands down. At least we're being honest with each other here. Good. Okay, so this is self-inflicted time robbers. So let's look at time robbers inflicted by others. Unclear job definition. How often have you had a situation where you're not 100% sure what your job definition is and what you're supposed to be doing? It's very common, isn't it? The other thing, of course, is not being able to do the job that you're being asked to do. That's low training, low, not ability, I don't like to use that word, but not understanding how to use a piece of software, not understanding how to use a piece of machinery, not understanding exactly how they want you to create a report. All of which gives you time thinking, how am I supposed to do this? Meetings called by others. How many times you go to a meeting and you think, what am I doing here? This is not necessary. How many times you've been at a meeting where you think, okay, we've dealt with this, now we're just wasting time. But you don't want to get up and be rude. Excessive workload. Now what this means is where people give you too much work and you're just taking it on and taking it on and taking it on. And you cannot do the work you need to do in the time given. And the danger here is you rush, so you do everything badly, as opposed to a few things well. Okay, what about when deadlines change? You thought you had 3 days to do something and now you've only got 2. How do you deal with that? What about conflicting priorities, where all of a sudden things change for you? Where suddenly what you think is a priority is somebody else's not so important. Very hard to deal with. Mistakes by staff, of your own staff, well that's one thing, but what about mistakes by managers and you have to clear up their mess? That's very stressful and it takes a lot of time. And lastly, we've covered this before, interruptions.